My partner and I have just settled into our new residence. It truly is the dwelling we always hoped for, an ideal match for our needs. We share our home with a feline named Bella that we adopted jointly, making our initial period there seem flawless. The sole initial drawback was the property on our right side. It appeared deserted because the previous owner began repairs but did not complete them. The design of the homes means that to our right, there is an opening leading to our backyard, and beside that lies the entrance to the empty house's rear yard. A barrier is missing between them because the owner took down the old fence to put up another, but never finished, resulting in both yards being openly connected. Beyond the deserted house lies another home divided by a fence. Based on our observations, a number of younger males resided there. Sometimes, coming back, we observed them walking through the neighboring yard to get to the road in front. We initially dismissed it. Perhaps they were acquainted with the owner and had approval. Time passed to our initial evening in the new residence. We were relaxing in the backyard, appreciating the area, and glanced up at the homes behind us, simply from interest. That is when we saw a male gazing emptily at us from a pane of glass. He was not concealing it. His actions were very clear. His features showed no emotion and the space was unlit, making the event even more disturbing. We supposed he was merely interested in his new neighbors. But following 30 minutes of the vacant look, we chose to go indoors. The subsequent days were uneventful. I attended my job, and my partner kept unpacking boxes. On another evening, we chose to sit in the yard again. It was night, but we liked viewing the stars and having meaningful talks until we detected the sound of the temporary wooden fence being shifted. 3 males materialized standing there looking at us. "Is everything all right?" I inquired, understanding they would not depart unless I spoke. The one who appeared youngest, approximately 29, was carrying a large sack, and we were unaware of its contents. He presented us with some pilfered dishwashing detergent, which we refused. I made a light-hearted comment because the circumstance felt very uncomfortable. He grinned and stated, "All right." Then they departed. What was notable was how they simply entered our yard without speaking, as though they had total permission to be present. We went back indoors thinking it was an isolated event, but everything began deteriorating from that point. They started entering our yard more frequently and behaving in manners obviously intended to frighten us. They would access the adjacent house by raising the partition that divided the rear yards and walking through. I omitted to state earlier, my partner and I are both 20, so naturally the notion that they might be attempting to intimidate us as to young females was our initial thought. On a particular day, while I was tidying the front room, 2 law enforcement officers came around the side of our home and went into the deserted yard. They lifted the fence and searched for several minutes before departing without a word. I found it odd, but carried on with my day, assuming perhaps the individuals next door were problematic. A few days later, the police rapped on our door. They informed us that the house behind us was now unoccupied. The men had been removed for disruptive conduct, apparently not only towards us, but with other residents as well. Truly, we felt eased. Even though they had not yet taken physical action, it meant they would not get the opportunity to worsen matters. We kept making ourselves at home, but one day while I was bathing, I heard a strong thud outside. I hurriedly dressed and rushed to locate my partner. I discovered her filming something from our extra bedroom window, which overlooks the yard of the now vacant house. I asked what was happening, but she quieted me. After a pause, she clarified. A male we had never observed before pointed up at our bedroom window, and when she saw him, he dashed at top speed toward our house. He tested our door handle as he passed, then hurried back into the yard, tossed the damaged fence up, and began striking all the windows of the empty house. We phoned the police right away. They arrived, viewed the recording, collected our account, and left. We were disturbed. Why would they test our door handle and then force entry into that house? What was his intention? A few nights later, while we were in bed, we heard whistling. the sort of whistle males employ to bother females. It was to 16 a.m. We listened silently and then detected someone tapping on our window. Frightened, we reviewed the camera feeds, but for some cause, they captured nothing. Whoever it was likely left soon after because the sound ceased. We were too afraid to rest, so the next day, we went to my mother's home and stayed the night. When we came back the following morning, we observed our video doorbell had been taken off and set on the ground. The memory card was missing. Someone had clearly returned and we knew who it was. Who else would do that? We called the police again and they advised us to keep every door and window secured. The female on the phone even mentioned that the removal of the camera might indicate they were preparing something, which scared us even more. But at least she was truthful. The whistling, thumping, and attempts to re-enter the house persisted for weeks. We filed numerous police reports. They never tried our door again, so we wished it was finished. But 3 weeks later, while in bed viewing amusing clips from our camera, we checked the live view. That is when we saw a male outdoors wearing a black mask over his mouth and nose with his head raised, standing before our yard with his arms extended wide as if he was copying a crucifixion pose. He looked up at our bedroom window with his head angled. We became still. At that time, we had relocated the camera inside the house, so it did not capture the event. We were so disturbed, we did not even consider recording the screen. He then spoke, but we could not discern his words. Then he rotated, walked to the other side of the road, and simply stood there looking at our house for roughly 30 minutes. We phoned the police once more. They stated it was not against the law to look at someone's property and discounted the entire matter. Even when we told them what he did on our lawn, they made us feel we were exaggerating. We could not sleep for days. Any sound outside frightened us, even ordinary ones. Then one night at 2:52 a.m., we received an alert. I woke my partner and said, "There is someone outside. I am certain. Please check the camera." She did, and there they were. Two masked males approaching from the side of our house, directing torch beams into our windows. One of them, the same male who had been bothering us, was holding what resembled a pry bar. YS. What was the purpose of this? For many days in a row, he would stand across the street, pointing, gesturing, or yelling things up at our window. Each time we looked, he would gaze emptily at us. It was plainly meant to scare us, and it succeeded. We kept reaching out to the police, but they have taken minimal action. The intimidation continues. We have cameras now, and we document everything, but we feel helpless. Just earlier today, he stood outside again, looking up at us. We captured it on video and we are completely frightened, but we will provide an update if anything further occurs. Allow me to state first that I am not insane. I realize how this will seem anxious, unstable, irrational, but I promise everything I will now describe truly occurred. It began with a visage, or more precisely, visages that all appear just a bit incorrect. 3 months ago, I concluded a romantic involvement with my former partner, Caleb. We had been a couple for nearly 2 years, and the separation was much needed. Caleb was not aggressive. He never struck me, but he was domineering and clingy in that subtle and deliberate manner, possibly the most troubling manner. He would perform actions such as monitor when I used my phone and question me about my daily activities to see if I would provide the same details twice. After I departed from him, I altered my phone number, deactivated my online profiles, and even relocated to a different apartment. I believed I was safe. Then came the coffee server. It was a Tuesday morning. I visited the small, modest coffee shop near my new residence. I had only been there a couple of times. As I approached the counter, the server, a female around my age, smiled at me. But something about her look made me hesitate. She angled her head and uttered, "Good morning, sunshine." I stiffened because that was Caleb's pet name for me. It was not a typical one. He would say it mockingly whenever I was distressed, like, "What is the matter, sunshine?" He liked to provoke. I dismissed it. Perhaps it was a random occurrence. But then it occurred again. Several days later, I took a hired car to work. A different driver than normal, an older male, perhaps in his 50s. He kept peeking in the rearview mirror as if attempting to identify me, and then he asked me if I ever determined what I was escaping from. He said it as casually as possible. I merely replied, "What?" And he simply laughed and shook his head as if I was part of some jest. Caleb said that to me once after I told him I required time to understand myself. He leaned in completely serious and asked, "Ever figure out what you're running from?" Now, to unfamiliar people have repeated things he said exactly. It kept occurring. A woman at the supermarket brushed against me and murmured, "You do not get to just vanish." A male on the sidewalk stated, "Still styling your hair like that," as he walked by. Another one, someone employed in my building, said, "You always enjoy this song," while humming the precise melody Caleb used to play when we fought. It was not their faces that alarmed me. It was the manner they looked at me, as if they knew me, or at least believed they did. They all had different faces, but their eyes all held the same look. I started believing I was losing my sanity. I mean, what else could clarify it? So I did something I was not proud of. I reached out to Caleb, not directly. I sent a note to his sister. I told her to inform him to cease. I guess perhaps he employed a private detective. Perhaps he was following me or manipulating people, telling individuals things about me. I simply wanted it to stop. She messaged back the next day stating, "I do not know what you are discussing. Caleb is in a treatment facility. He has been there for 6 weeks without a phone." I did not trust her. I thought she was protecting him. That was until I saw a photo she posted of him on a social media site a week later, appearing pale and thin, holding one of those one-day sobriety tokens. So, it could not be Caleb, or at least not directly. I could not shake the sensation that these strangers knew things they should not. However, one night, I worked late. I did not want to go home because my apartment no longer felt secure. Not that anything terrible occurred inside it. I simply disliked being alone. Around 10 p.m., I finally decided to leave. I walked the 10 minutes to my place, keeping my head lowered, earphones in, but no audio playing, something I learned to do so I could still hear if someone was pursuing me. When I turned the corner onto my street, I saw someone seated on the steps of the building opposite mine. A young male with his hood up but his head down. I nearly ignored him until he spoke. He said, "Chilly tonight, isn't it, sunshine?" I halted walking. He did not look at me. He just stared at the pavement as if reading something on it. I slowly walked past and did not utter a word. When I reached my building, I went upstairs and fastened every lock on the door. I sat on the sofa for hours just listening to silence. Eventually, I fell asleep. The next morning, I woke to discover my welcome mat overturned. That might not seem significant, but I live alone, and the door to my apartment is on the highest floor. You do not just accidentally walk past my door. The underside of my mat had something scrawled in pen. It stated, "You can alter your face to, if you desire, but I will still identify you." I did not understand its meaning, but I still became sick. That day, I reserved a hotel for the weekend. I left my apartment without packing anything. I did not feel safe even collecting clothes. I just needed to be somewhere populated. The hotel clerk assigned me a room on the 4th level. It was compact, silent, and somewhat airless, but it felt safe. But only until about 2 a.m. when someone knocked on my door. There were 3 slow knocks. I sat up in bed and waited. They knocked again eventually. I looked through the door viewer, and it was a woman perhaps in her 40s. Her face was completely blank and without expression. She was just staring directly at the door. She did not say anything, so I did not make a sound, and eventually she left. It was one of the most upsetting things I had ever witnessed. The next morning, I asked the front desk if someone had visited my room. They said no one should have been up there, particularly that late. All the rooms on my floor were unoccupied. That is when I understood. These were not random individuals. They were being instructed and provided my information. They were given phrases Caleb used. But if it was not Caleb, who would do it and why? I thought about Caleb in rehab, about his fixation with control and ensuring I was never completely gone. He did not need to be the one knocking. He just needed to send others to do it. So I began investigating, and there was one discussion I recalled from months before the breakup. Caleb talking about a forum he was on, a place where people shared methods. He made it sound like it was for efficiency or self-betterment. I do not recall its name. Honestly, I do not believe he ever provided me the name. But in hindsight, it sounded like some eerie, cult-like role-playing nonsense, except it is occurring to me in reality. Someone, probably Caleb, had paid people to utter his words and imitate his patterns so that even if he was out of my life, technically, I would still be perpetually reminded of him. It was not following in the conventional sense. It was psychological vandalism, as if he was spraying his presence onto strangers so I could never be certain who I was seeing. I do not believe it is about observing me, but rather about ensuring I never cease watching for him. I moved again and vanished from social media again. I even changed my hair color. I told friends not to tell anyone my location. It succeeded until last week. I was walking home from the bookshop and a woman passed me on the street and said, still concealing behind books, "Sunshine." She did not stop walking or even glance at me. I do not believe this will ever cease. Perhaps he paid some bizarre covert service to do this to me for a year. Who knows? Perhaps he made it public. Perhaps this is some perverse underground contest now. Who can frighten Sunshine the best? Who can get the nearest without contact? I can no longer trust anyone's face. The constant suspicion is genuinely eroding my psychological well-being. My relatives are a stay-at-home group that does not journey, so everyone was astonished when my aunt suggested an excursion to one of the big lakes in Michigan. We consented, wishing to form new shared experiences. My relative reserved a large rental home that could somehow house all 18 of us, which seemed unbelievable given the cost. The house was positioned directly on the shore with beautiful lake vistas that extended for great distances, nearly like a sea. Most of us occupied rooms in the primary house, but due to our big party, some were put in a secondary structure directly behind it, a 2-car garage with sleeping areas above. My 3 relatives and I were allotted to sleep there. Initially, we did not give it much thought. We spent most of the first day enjoying the heated tub, relaxing on the shore, and taking in the view. It was not until darkness that we entered the garage properly. The area was old-fashioned and uncared for with carpeted bathrooms that had a mildew odor, discolored bedding, and an inadequately fastened lock on the door. Clearly, the cleaning staff concentrated on the main house and neglected the garage. My relatives were disgusted and declined to sleep on the beds unless we laundered the sheets. So I proposed we do washing. The appliances were compact, so we could only clean one set of bed linens at a time. And it was evident we would be up late. We spent time upstairs, waiting for the first cycle. My relative Maria grumbled about how we were assigned the poorest location. And as she spoke, I began to feel anxious, as if something negative was approaching. I have experienced this sensation before, an uncommon type of instinct that usually concludes in a bad dream or something more severe. I told my relatives to remain watchful, and they heeded, especially since we had all endured an intrusion before when we lived in a particular city. Around midnight, a chime sounded from the ground floor, indicating the wash was complete. I went downstairs alone, transferred the load to the dryer, and brought up the freshly scented sheets. When my relatives saw how clean they were, they wanted their bedding washed too. So I kept going up and down between cycles doing everyone's sheets. At approximately 2:37 a.m., we were finally finished. We prepared the beds and were too exhausted to remain awake any longer. My relative Nikki insisted we keep the light on, and while they all fell asleep swiftly, I stayed up completing some academic tasks on my phone. I am a sensitive sleeper, something that remained with me since the break-in, and I stayed highly conscious of my environment, even while partly asleep. Then, around 3 o'clock a.m., a loud thump struck the garage door as if someone had flung their body against it. I sat up, alarmed, but my relatives did not stir. I attempted to convince myself it was merely wind, though the noise was too solid for that. Still, I stayed quiet and tried to sleep. But then it happened again. Same ear-splitting crash, this time vibrating the garage door. The structure shook from the force. I was fully alert now, observing the lamplit room as my relatives continued to sleep. No creature or strong breeze could cause that. 20 minutes later, the third boom struck. The garage shook again, and finally, 2 of my relatives sat up quickly. I asked if they heard that, already knowing the response. Nikki asked what that was, and I said, I do not know, but this is the 3rd instance I am hearing it. We all concurred no wind could cause that sound. Nikki recommended texting her mother, my aunt, so we did. It was for 11 a.m. when she answered, realizing something grave must be occurring. She woke my uncle, who ran outside to inspect the property. We stayed upstairs, too scared to move until we heard knocking. It was my uncle at the door, and when we opened it, we saw him standing there with my father and a few of our older male relatives. That is when I knew it was serious. There was no one joking around. My uncle told us to collect our belongings, that we were going to the main house. Then he said there was someone on the property, and that is what made my heart drop. I tossed everything into my suitcase, and we all hurried out of the garage. Once inside the main house, most of the family woke from the noise and activity. We sat in the living room, attempting to understand it all. I told them about the first 2 loud impacts, and my relatives confirmed the third. My aunt explained that when my uncle went out to investigate, she accompanied him. He yelled, "Hey," at someone standing behind the garage. The door to the main house slammed shut behind her right then, and there was no wind to explain it. She feared someone might have entered the house, so she ran to wake my father and relatives. After searching, no one else was found inside. Then my uncle described what he witnessed. A man stood behind the garage, not hiding or moving, but staring as if he wished to be seen. When my uncle called out, the man did not react. He simply walked away and disappeared, not into the darkness, but into nothingness. The leaves on the ground did not crackle, and there were no footprints left behind. My uncle is not someone who fabricates tales either. He is a solemn, reasonable man, which made everything more frightening. My brothers added that they discovered the Joker cards, one in the main house and one in the garage. The one in the garage was distorted and sinister in appearance. One cousin noted that gestures represent ridicule and loud noises happened around 3 o'clock a.m., the so-called demon's hour. It was as if we were being mocked. My uncle had even checked for footprints, but saw only his and my relatives, not the man's. Another cousin drove down the road during the event to try and spot someone escaping, but found no one. That day, no one returned to the garage. We crammed into the main house, on floors, sofas, anywhere there was space. My mother gave up her bed so we could sleep more comfortably. On the second night, she slept on a couch by the large windows and woke around 4 a.m. to footsteps on the porch. She did not dare open her eyes. She was afraid of seeing someone peering in. Then she heard someone testing the basement door. It had a weak latch, and my brothers and male relatives were sleeping down there. The door shook as someone attempted to break in. My mother hurried to the basement, but by the time she reached the beachside entrance, no one was there, and all the boys were still sound asleep. That was our final night. Though we planned to stay until Tuesday, we departed on Monday instead. On the journey home, we could not stop discussing what had transpired. When my mother learned I had been going downstairs alone during laundry, she hypothesized that someone might have been observing me and believed I was alone in the garage. The time between my last trip downstairs and us going to sleep aligned far too precisely. With the banging noises, theories began to form. Some of us thought it was a local attempting to scare us off. Others believed there was something supernatural, especially because of the Joker cards. My aunt pointed out that a normal person would have fled when my uncle spotted them, but this man did not run. He just watched and vanished. We contacted the rental host who claimed she would review the footage from the camera above the garage door, but we never received a reply. It made us wonder, did she know the man? Was he a neighbor? When we first arrived, my sister and cousin had walked the beach and passed a woman next door. She observed them coldly without warmth or a hello, just an inhospitable stare. The house was in a remote location, and we understood how constant rental guests might irritate residents, but we were considerate. We did not merit what occurred. This was our first family vacation and hopefully not our final, even after everything we experienced.